On October 1st, 2013, Dread Pirate Roberts is sitting alone at Glen Park Library in San Francisco, typing on his Samsung 700Z laptop. He's chatting with a man who goes by the name of Cyrus, whom he believes is an employee of Silk Road, Dread's anonymous online marketplace. Those sitting around him in the library have no idea who they come into contact with, one of the most infamous internet anons in history. At least, that's what he thinks. The man he's chatting with, Cyrus, is really Jared DeYagan, an agent of the Department of Homeland Security. He has been infiltrating the Silk Road for several years. Hiding in a stairwell of the library, he asks Dredd to log into Silk Road's administrative site to take a look at something. Then he gives a signal. Two undercover officers in plain clothing start an argument nearby to distract Dredd, while the third officer grabs his laptop. Finally, after years of chasing down the elusive Dread Pirate Roberts, they have him. His real name, Ross Ulbricht. Before we get into the story, you may have heard this name before, Ross. If you've stumbled across the libertarian or Bitcoin side of social media, you've likely encountered the campaign for his freedom. You've also heard that it was successful, that he was pardoned by Donald Trump. You may have come searching for answers. Who is this guy? Is he a dangerous drug pin? Did he order a hitman to take out his enemies? Why is he treated like a libertarian messiah? Hopefully you'll find your answers in this video, and maybe leave with more questions. Let's get into the story. Ross started out the Silk Road website when he was only 26 years old, but before he became the creator of this dark web marketplace, he had a relatively normal life. In fact, it seemed like he was on track for a fairly successful future. Ross was born to Lynn and Kirk Ulbricht in Austin, Texas, March 27th of 1984. He was an outdoorsy and smart kid who became an Eagle Scout before studying physics at the University of Texas. He later earned a master's degree in materials science at Penn State. It was in Pennsylvania that Ross joined the Libertarian Student Group and got involved in the Ron Paul campaign. After stumbling down the libertarian rabbit hole, he turned down an offer from Cornell to pursue a PhD. He decided to dive deeper into entrepreneurship, the philosophy of freedom, and free market economics. Around this time, he started building the Silk Road. In his own words, the idea was to create a website where people could buy anything anonymously, with no digital trail that could lead back to them. This took a while to build. According to a journal found in his confiscated laptop, he initially listed mushrooms he had been growing in Bastrop, Texas, to generate interest and clientele for the website. Silk Road allowed users to buy and sell almost anything, with some moderation to weed out fakes and particularly immoral listings. At first, it was a slow start, but Ross had a big vision for the platform. In 2011, he wrote, "I'm creating a year of prosperity and power beyond what I have ever experienced before. Silk Road is going to become a phenomenon, and at least one person will tell me about it without knowing I was its creator." Over the course of 2011, the site grew rapidly, gaining attention from news outlets like Gawker and even US senators who of course despised Silk Road and Bitcoin. If you're in Ross's shoes, that's pretty stressful. You're about to make some powerful enemies, and who knows what they might do to you. He wrote, "I started to get in a bad state of mind. I was mentally taxed, and now I'm extremely vulnerable and scared. The US government was my main enemy, was aware of me, and some of its members were calling for my destruction. This was the biggest force-wielding organization on the planet." What did he mean by that? A force-wielding organization. In 1918, Max Weber, one of the founders of sociology, gave a speech on this very topic. He said, "The modern state is a compulsory association that organizes domination. It has been successful in seeking to monopolize the legitimate use of physical force as means of domination within a territory. This decisive means political for politics and violence." Ross feared the organization. Essentially, he feared losing his life and liberty if the US government cracked down on him. Unfortunately, it wasn't an irrational fear. As the site grew, Ross had to expand his team. Over the time, he had become overconfident in his ability to protect himself and his employees. In chat logs, he once said, "The risk is near zero. It'll be very hard for feds to build up a case against me, especially with all the encryptions." The feds broke into the encryptions. This is why they needed to distract him at the library to get the key on his laptop while it was still logged in and awake. As soon as they retrieved it on that fateful day in October 2013, they spent several hours photographing everything, his chat logs, diary, all of it. Ross's trials became national news. The idea of an anonymous website where users could engage in shady dealings and buy illicit substances was captivating. Ross was set up to be the fall guy for everything illegal that the platform had become. Rumors spread and his reputation became tarnished by allegations for murder-hire plots. The prosecution brought up that these supposed attempted hits, but were never actually charged him or proved that it ever happened. It seemed as if they were trying to paint him as a psychopathic dark web kingpin. One alleged victim of these murder-for-hire plots was Curtis Green, a Silk Road admin responsible for registering new users. According to Curtis, one day he received a package at his front door, a kilogram of cocaine sent by federal agents attempting to entrap him. Curtis was arrested and gave up all Silk Road login credentials. Then, $350,000 worth of Bitcoin mysteriously disappeared from Silk Road. It later turned out that rogue federal agents had stolen the money. To make matters worse, the corrupt organizations fabricated an elaborate story. They told Curtis Green that DPR, Dread Pirate Roberts, wanted him beaten up. They faked his torture and waterboarding and staged his death using a can of red soup. Curtis spent the next year in hiding, fearing for his life. These revelations only came to light after Ross's arrest, when DEA agents Carl Force and Secret Service agent Sean Bridges were found guilty of stealing Bitcoin and engaging in extortion. None of this was mentioned at Ross's trials. Instead, Ross was convicted of 7 charges, none of them violent, none of them involving murder for hire, or even selling drugs. He was sentenced 2 life terms plus 40 years, more than the prosecution had requested. Government also made him pay nearly $200 million in restitution, despite never profiting from that amount. It was clear Ross wasn't being punished for running a marketplace. He was being made an example of. Ross spent years in prison, watching his mother fight tirelessly for his release. Over time, his letters reflected growing despair. In solitary confinement, he wrote, "If prisoners would prefer physical torture over imprisonment, the inescapable conclusion is that prison is even more cruel. We are forced to spend years, even decades here, spirits crushed, hope abandoned." But Ross never became irrelevant. Thanks to his mother's relentless advocacy, the Free Ross movement persisted, and in 2025, Donald Trump signed a full pardon. Now, Ross is free. But why? Why does President Trump gain from pardoning Ulbricht? Trump pardoned with the intentions of citing a belief that the importance of liberty and privacy, as well as concerns about the severity of his life, sentence, and nonviolent crimes. The Silk Road was known for facilitating the sale of illegal drugs and other illicit goods. Since Ross was jailed in 2015, a Free Ross campaign had vocally been advocating for his release that became entwined with Trump's desire to create more libertarian society in the US. She also said that Ross's campaign had aligned with Trump's proximity to tech cryptocurrency allies like Elon Musk. The kind of connections between libertarians and cryptocurrency were the way that the Silk Road operated and darknet markets arose and the Silk Road, shut down by the FBI, were operating. Legal analyst Eli Honig, who was involved in the trial and conviction of Ross, stated that the pardoning of Ulbricht completely undermines what the Department of Justice stands for, that the action is purely, almost overtly political. What does this mean for Bitcoin in the future? Loss of decentralization. Bitcoin was designed to be decentralized. No single entity, especially the government, can control it. If the government took over Bitcoin, it would likely mean that there would be centralized control, undermining its core principles. Controlling Bitcoin networks by regulating national mining operations, requiring transactions to go through government-approved nodes, implementing policies to censor reverse transactions. There would also be more security and surveillance and loss of anonymity. Bitcoin transactions are pseudonyms, but the government would likely enforce stricter tracking mechanisms. This would involve mandatory identifying verifications for all transactions, linking Bitcoin wallets to SSNs, and using blockchains analytics to track spending habits and effectively ending financial privacy. Would it even be possible? The government could regulate Bitcoin on ramps and off-ramps, exchanges, banks, businesses accepting Bitcoin. Bitcoin miners operating globally, meaning other nations such as China, Russia, and etc. could resist US control. A government-controlled Bitcoin wouldn't even be Bitcoin anymore. It would lose its appeal. If the US government took over Bitcoin, it would likely destroy the most valuable features, making it no different than the current banking system,